Well, this afternoon, in our third session of Cultivating Ideas, which is a series in which we invite Austin Seminary faculty to share with us things they're working on, things they're excited about, things that will help you in your life of faith and in your ministry. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Phil Helsel. He is our associate professor in the Nancy Taylor Williamson Distinguished Chair in Pastoral Care. He joined the Austin Seminary faculty in 2016, and he had previously served for 4 years on the faculty of Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. He earned his PhD in pastoral theology and practical theology from Princeton Theological Seminary. He holds an MDiv in pastoral care and counseling from Princeton Seminary and the BA summa cum laude in Bible and Religion from Anderson University. He is an ordained elder in the Presbyterian Church USA, and he's the author of many articles, and most recently, I think this is his most recent book, Phil, Pastoral Care and Counseling and Introduction. He does teach our Introduction to Pastoral Care courses here at the seminary, but he also was just telling me that he teaches a course called Positive Dispositions in Pastoral Care. And I think that sounds so intriguing. And he said it's one of the few classes where people leave studying about pastoral care feeling happy and uplifted. So I'm really excited to hear how he's going to share with us today about flourishing, drawing from the work of positive psychology and his own expertise and commitments to pastoral theology and practical theology, and how that is lived out in our lives. So welcome, Phil, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for that wonderful introduction and for the work that you've done over the years supporting pastoral care and supporting the life of the mental health of ministers. And so I'm really excited that you've asked me to do this and to share with you all. Let me just kind of get started a little bit by sharing just some of the vision here and where it comes from, and given a couple caveats as I jump in. This is indeed based on a class that I've taught before called Pastoral Care and the Positive Dispositions. And in that class, we've kind of walked through different positive dispositions like empathy or joy, connection to nature, sexuality, and we've kind of explored deeply what those dispositions give to us. And then we've tried to build practices based on those dispositions into our life. And the end of the class has students kind of exploring like their own positive disposition. And so it becomes a chance for them to bring into the class something that's really important to them, gratitude or music, or I've had so many interesting ones, creative writing. So it's just been kind of building a little bit on research from that class as I share with you. And I'm going to just have a conversation with you today rather than share a bunch of PowerPoints in the background, because if I shared PowerPoints with you, my head would disappear. So I'll walk through kind of what I was going to share with you in terms of PowerPoints. And then I'll do that kind of briefly, 20 or 30 minutes, and we can move to having some discussion. I'd really like for our conversation to break down along kind of 2 or 3 points. So we'll start out by talking about what it is that's interfering with our flourishing these days and kind of analyzing that. And then we'll turn to looking at some of the practices that help. And we're going to kind of close with some questions and reflections, maybe more how-to and practical matters. Does that sound like a good plan for everybody? Thumbs up? Okay. So by the end of the class, you should have the basic ideas about what flourishing might mean, and you might already have some tools to apply it in your life and ways to think through it, and maybe ways to identify some of the things that might not be contributing to your flourishing as much as you'd like. So that's kind of the roadmap. So there's going to be several activities today, and one of the first activities that I'd like to get started with is just pull out a piece of paper and write down 3 things that went well in the last 24 hours and why. And we're going to do this for a couple of minutes. And it's really important that you write down the why part of the question. Could be big, could be small, mixture of both. Okay, so this is one of my daily self-care practices and something that I also have taught in the class. I encourage, if we can stop here and you can do more later if you want. I encourage the class to do it as well. And I make them kind of in the first month and a half of class, right? Every day, their top 3 things that went well and why, and then reflect on that in a journal exercise right after the first assignment in class. And it really, that exercise itself really increases your mental well-being. And it does so even one of the most important parts to do is the why. Why did it matter to you that this particular thing went well? And so let me also just give the disclaimer that none of the advice or tips that I'm going to give today are meant to take the place of good medical advice or going and seeing your psychiatrist or counselor or spiritual director or taking medicine to feel better. All those things I'm a big fan of. So I'm not intending any of my presentation today to be distract from those particular approaches. So I was thinking a little bit as I got started about kind of the Apostle Paul and his injunction to focus on things that are good, just, wise, honorable, think on these things. And I was also thinking about, and so this whole presentation has to do with that a little bit, what it means to actively kind of clear out a space for goodness in our hearts. And then I was also thinking about Paul's injunction that he's been able to find a way to be content in whatever circumstances life has thrown him. And so I was thinking about how that might play here as well. Okay, so now I'm getting started on hope you enjoyed the 3 things that went well exercise. You can do that kind of in any point in your life. And you can actually write more than 3 things. That's totally fine. And you could get carried away. It's completely okay if you do that. But the most important thing is to write why. And that's where you get into the relational stuff and that kind of thing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what seems to be kind of going wrong with flourishing or happiness right now. People are wealthier than ever. But there's lower levels of happiness than there used to be. So part of what seems to be going on is higher materialism along with lower levels of happiness. So college students today are more materialistic and less satisfied, and are usually often driven around more materialistic goals than in the last few decades. And they're less likely to reflect on a life philosophy that's guiding them in their decisions. And materialism in college, interestingly, predicted unhappiness and higher mental illnesses 2 decades later. So what we're seeing is a kind of we should be in situations where we're happier, but we're less happy than we could be. So let's talk a little bit about why that is. One of the factors is what's called miswanting. It's just being mistaken about what you're going to like and how much you're going to like something in the future. So you might have a particular goal in mind. You might want to make a particular career switch, or you might want a particular aspect of status, and you'll think it'll make you happy, but it actually makes you less happy than you think it will. So you can be deceived about how much you'll enjoy something in the future. And that's a pretty common trick that our minds play on us, kind of what they call miswanting. There's another thing that plays a role, and that's the role of social comparison. So people would rather make $50,000 and be around people making $25,000 than make $100,000 around people making $250,000. So social comparison is a very powerful factor. There's kind of controversy about social media's impact, but social media might be one of those places where people kind of present curated visions of themselves, and then we all kind of compare ourselves and our meltdowns to the nicest moments of other people's lives. And then we have a fear of missing out and all those kinds of things as well. May not always give us the community that we hope for. Although I'd say a caveat with the LGBTQ folks for whom social media and internet connections on the internet can be really powerful as well. So that's a mixed sword when it comes to social comparison. There's one more effect I want to mention that kind of gets in the way of our happiness. It's kind of a balancing out effect. So we exaggerate how much we'll be impacted by bad outcomes, not getting the internship we wanted. And we downplay how much we'll enjoy good ones. So people winning the lottery are not as happy as they would have thought, those kinds of things. So we just don't do a very good job forecasting how we're going to respond emotionally to bad events. And our own minds tend to kind of flatten them out over time. So there's less of a bump for the bad stuff or good stuff. And we have a way of kind of like settling our minds back into even keel a little bit. Okay, so now I'm launching into the more positive part of the presentation a little bit here and presenting you with some of the happiness research. Sorry, I'm doing this without the slides, so I'm just kind of going to have to give you the information. So happiness researchers have found that if you think about what are the factors that contribute to happiness, like what role does genetics play, life circumstances, thoughts, or actions, you might have a guess about that in your mind. It turns out that about 50% of happiness is genetics, 10% is life circumstances, and 40% is our thoughts and actions. And so when I found that out, that was really surprising to me. So I thought we can really do a great deal in kind of changing the habits with which we engage and the thoughts that we have about our life. So now I'm going to introduce, so if we can play with that 40% a little bit, our thoughts and actions about our circumstances, one of the ways we could do that is with a model of flourishing. And I'm going to introduce a model of flourishing that was coined by the psychologist Marty Seligman in his concept of flourishing, in his book, Flourishing. And there's 5 parts. So if you like acronyms, get ready. The acronym is PERMA. And so I'll chat that out as well so you can see it. PERMA is positive emotions like hope, interest, joy, love, compassion, pride, amusement, and gratitude. And positive emotions are either they occur spontaneously or we can foster them, kind of return to them. But positive emotions, we can get into this a little bit more as well. They also kind of broaden and build a space in the soul that's receptive to more positive emotions. So like fostering joy or hope, compassion, curiosity, connection to nature, or sexual intimacy, they might like deepen our connection to our own emotional well-being so that we can return more easily to those positive emotions in the future. So that's the first one, positive emotions. Number 2 is engagement or flow, the E. And so this is like, when do you kind of get in the zone where you leave the world's worries behind and you're just kind of like on autopilot, but in a good way? I mean, it's like you're learning an instrument or you're doing something that really like takes your mind to a new place. It's that state of flow that brings relaxation and calm and joy and creativity with it. R is relationships. So what's the nature of your relationships? Do you have like close relationships where you can let your hair down and people who really know you and can be honest with you? Do you have like colleagues who you can run things by if you reach a tricky situation? Do you have like someone close to you who knows your secrets, or maybe you could pay to do that for you? Sometimes paid friends are nice. as well. So relationships, and then there's also weak ties, which are like your everyday people you run into in the coffee shop and that kind of thing, but who know you over time. And those kinds of relationships seem to matter as well. So like, what's the nature of people who can just kind of get down there with you and bless you and accompany you on life's journey, and like really show you that they're not over against you, but with you, as you're walking through life's journey. Those are the kind of relationships that really help in this flourishing model. And the fourth one now is meaning. So this is the sense that you're giving something back to the world that's bigger than yourself, and that's going to make some difference, appreciable difference. Even if it's small, having a source of meaning could be really important, like at a particular junction or season in your life. And people will go through a lot of sacrifice to eventually have a sense of meaning in their work and in their environments. And if they have meaning, they can do a lot of things and work through a lot of adversity as well. And the final one is kind of surprising. It's accomplishment for accomplishment's sake. So this one is like, you just do things to get them done. And like, you're just that kind of person. Maybe you relate to this. You might be the person who checks off their to-do list in the morning or every other day or something, and really takes pride in being organized, but accomplishment for its own sake. So there's kind of a meaning in that as well. So PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, all those things go together, and they provide a clearer picture of flourishing than any single one, like moment in time when you ask somebody if they're flourishing or satisfied with their life. Instead, if you measure all these 5 things, PERMA, you get a clearer picture of where they are in their life. And it's a better measure of flourishing than just a one-time asking someone if they're satisfied with their life. It's turned out to be really like quite strong clinically as well. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some of the things that we did in the class that were actually assignments in the class. And so one of the, and I'll just introduce them to you as practices for flourishing as well. One of the ideas behind the class is this kind of broaden and build theory of emotions that was coined by Barbara Fredrickson. And she says, when we foster positive experiences, we have greater bandwidth for the stressful times in our lives and a reservoir of skills that we can then return to. So you might kind of consider this kind of like positive reminiscences or something like that. How much are you able to, when you're stressed out and you come back from a busy day, are you able to kind of return to a happy place or like a peaceful person in your life or a joyful memory? And that term, like positive reminiscences, is the opposite of like fixating or ruminating. And positive reminiscences kind of creates the feelings again of positive emotions that then like just really expand the soul and allow it to breathe and allow it to encounter more, even further joy. So that's the kind of broaden and build theory of emotions. And already you might have a sense of like how good you are at the positive reminiscences. Just by hearing that description, you might be able to think, am I good at that? Or, am I able to kind of return there? And that might be a practice as well. Okay, so one of the first things that we talked about in the class and we looked at, and I know Melissa's done work on this as well, is gratitude. So one of the things that I had them do as an assignment, I had them choose between 2 assignments. One of the assignments was write a letter of gratitude and deliver it in person and read it out loud to someone that who's had like the greatest impact on your emotional and physical well-being. And a lot of my students did this assignment, and they found it really like grounding and life-giving. And several of them told some really powerful stories about what it meant to the people that they brought the letter to. And then what happens if it goes well is that person then becomes even greater resource for you in your psychic landscape or your community of your heart. That person then becomes somebody you can return to in your mind and say, what would this person say to me right now? Like, can I kind of channel them a little bit? Writing that letter of gratitude puts you back in touch with that person in a way that could be like just help you feel that they're a part of your life again in a fresh way. A little caveat or warning, I found the letter of gratitude activities went best if it wasn't like a supercharged relationship, like a really close and complicated relationship. Those can be complicated because they're bids for attention or trying to get over a trauma from the past. So if I was going to do it over again, I'd encourage students maybe not to do those kinds of letters as their letter of gratitude. That's kind of a little more complicated step, at least for this initial try. So again, writing a letter of gratitude, like writing your 3 things that went well in the last 24 hours, really adds an incredible boost to your well-being and can reduce anxiety and depression significantly. So it's a really like powerful kind of soul work activity. Okay, the other thing that I have students do if they want to do that is do a random act of kindness that they undertake for strangers or others. And this could be like through a church program or something like that, or it could be, bringing along food and drink and giving it to people as you're passing them on the highway, something like that, where you have a chance to undertake a kind act for strangers. And undertaking kindness for others has a really powerful impact on joy. It increases the joy in our lives. Okay, so I'm coming towards the end here, and I'm gonna just close with a couple of thoughts. One, I want to introduce you to the idea of Lozada ratios. I don't know if you know this concept from your work. I'll chat it out because it's a new term. But Lozada ratios are the ratios of positive to negative comments. And they found that like the flourishing researchers find that in the healthiest corporations have a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 positive comments to every negative comment. And it's really important that organizations don't have 0 negative comments, right? It's not good if you have 15-0 as a Lozada ratio, because institutions do need to be correcting themselves and critiquing themselves. But they found the healthiest ratio is about a 3-to-1 ratio for the organization that you lead or something like that. And then when it comes to your personal life, they say it's a 5-to-1 for the people closest to you. They need a 5-to-1. If you're going to critique the way that they load the dishwasher or something, they need 5 positives or something on the other side. So that's the idea of Lozada ratios. Now I'm going to close with kind of like one final piece that we do in the class. I introduce people to the notions of signature strengths, and I'm going to chat this out to you as well, and you can take the test if you like. I'll put the link in the chat. So signature strengths are those parts of your personality that are really like, they're raring to go. I mean, they are just like, you are ready to do these particular things. And if you feel like it, you can log on to this website. You have to give them your email. Sorry about that. But you can take your signature strengths. And the most important thing is that you focus on your top 4 or 5 signature strengths, and you try to do those things in your workplace more often. So what I had students do in class was I had them take the signature strengths test, and then I had them focus on a signature strength in a difficult part of their seminary or work life and just try to use that signature strength. Say your signature strength is an appreciation for beauty. Well, you would approach your next seminary assignment with an appreciation for beauty in mind. And then they had to journal on what that meant to them to try out their signature strengths. So especially if you have like an obstacle in your life or something that's not going as smoothly as you would like, using your signature strengths and maybe cycling through your top 4 or 5 signature strengths can really be a powerful way to get you back on track again and get you started like really loving what you're doing in ways that bring like more of your personal investment. There's parts when you do the signature strength test, you'll also see the things that are your really low signature strengths. I don't know. We don't have time to get into that exactly. That might be a different presentation, or your 5 deadly sins or something like that at the bottom of your list. But focusing on your own signature strengths can be a really powerful tool as well. And I found students got a lot out of that part of the class as well. So I'm going to just summarize really quickly here, and we've talked through a lot pretty fast. We started by talking about some of the things that don't make us as happy, and we looked at miswanting, materialism, social comparison, and we looked kind of how ubiquitous those are. We're kind of materially better off now, but we're less happy than we used to be. And we turned to kind of like a broaden and build theory of emotions, and we looked especially at this idea of PERMA, positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. And we looked at how like fostering those particular things can be really powerful. You could kind of focus on each of them in turn, really, if you wanted to kind of strengthen your flourishing. And then we looked at some particular activities, like the 3 things that went well and why: gratitude, kindness, and the strength survey. And we looked at some particular ways that like you could like strengthen your own particular experience of happiness, actually reduce even levels of clinical depression by a significant amount by engaging in some of these activities, or maybe all of them if you wanted to, and writing about them and talking about them with others. And I don't know if you feel this way a little bit too, and I'll kind of come to a close, but sometimes for me, I have to really like include physical self-care, like eating well and sleeping 8 hours a night and things like that. And I also sometimes have to take breaks from things like social media or the news. During COVID, I stopped listening to the news or watching it, and now I just read it on the Sunday newspaper, and I kind of like get all my news on Sunday. I just found it was like a little too intense all the time. I don't know if we're made for those levels of stress or not, but I'm just kind of riffing on a couple of like self-care practices that I think are kind of important to me, not checking email late at night or doing work late at night. You might have some practices like that that kind of help you return to that positive state of positive reminiscences I was talking about before, which I don't know if you have a sense of like how easy you're able to return to that, but that can be a pretty good like kind of marker for mental health overall too. Like just how easily are you able to foster positive emotions in your life? And can you kind of return pretty quickly to a place of gratitude or joy or hope or empathy and compassion? And if you're not able to, but you used to be able to, what's different now, and those kinds of things. So those might just be some like self-diagnostic things you'd be thinking about as well. Okay, that was a lot, but thanks so much. I'll turn to questions now. And I'm
So,
so glad you're on here.
yes, I'm just, trying to make myself stay to the end before I go and do my signature strengths and practice all the other things. I'm so inspired, Phil. But we do have time for some questions. And because of the size of this group, let's start by asking you to put your questions in the chat. And I will voice those for all of us to hear. I know one thing was struck by in your presentation, Phil, was this breakdown of the 50, 10, and 40. And part of what that helped me realize is just getting curious about that 50% that is genetic, and it got me thinking about the things I struggle with and thinking back about my parents. And, we have a grandmother that everybody says she suffered from melancholia. That was a kind of a 19th century word, I think, but it's, I don't know, in an interesting way, makes me feel better to think that there's a big chunk of what I struggle with in my own happiness that I just was born with. And that doesn't mean I'm, doomed, but it just really was helpful to get that full picture. I don't know how they measured that, but I found it really sounded about right to me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that particular citation is from a book about happiness by Sonia Lurabamowski or something. I'm going to butcher it, but yeah, Melissa, I'm interested in what you said, because I think it's counterintuitive, but it's almost a blessing on the other hand to say that 50% of it is genetic. It's a way of kind of honoring what the ancestors gave us too, and kind of not letting that distinctively shape our response to it, but also like honoring, also thinking back on those people that we've known who've suffered in our families, and people who've been close to us. And kind of, I think too, I wish that they would have had all the resources that we have now in terms of talking about feelings and like self-definition and resources. And I just think that's an element of compassion too, that thinking there's so many things that we can do now and resources that we have that can help us move forward. I wish that folks who struggled in the previous generations would have had that as well. I wonder what richness might have come from that too.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah. So we have some questions. And hello, Courtney. It's nice to see you. And her question is, what the heck is happiness? That's my translation. She really said, please define happiness, maybe in contrast or comparison to joy.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for this. Thanks, Courtney. I think one thing that I would just kind of go with that PERMA definition, Courtney, the positive emotions, engagement or flow, relationship, meaning and accomplishment for accomplishment's sake. And the reason why I think that's like a pretty nice definition of happiness is it's well-rounded, and it takes into account different aspects of our life that might be different, might be stronger at different times. We might be like especially strong at meaning and engagement, but we might have a weak period in relationships in our life. And even just remembering the PERMA acronym as a resource, I find is really helpful, to kind of try to balance those things out. And you can also take an online test and test your own PERMA, kind of like see where you are on all those different factors. And it's interesting because you can have probably not surprising to you that you could have strengths and positive emotions or engagement, or relationships, meaning and accomplishment. But I think looking at them all together provides a really nice and balanced definition of happiness. So I might just go with that as a kind of go-to definition of happiness. I'm not exactly sure how to distinguish it from joy, except for that, like maybe joy has a little bit of a sense of the limit situation to it, like that mountain peak experience. And there's also a lot you can do to foster joy in terms of like helping others really helps you foster joy as well. Like being involved in the world really like increases your sense of joy. I'm thinking here about the Book of Joy that I assigned in the class by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And my students are really like impressed that religious leaders who've gone through everything that those two men have gone through can have such a strong sense of joy. And it really comes back to both their religious practice and their commitment to this, like trying to alleviate the suffering in the world, which they also say brings them joy. So yeah, great question, Courtney.
And if I can put in a plug that Phil's too modest to put in for himself, he's one of the authors of a part of the curriculum that's about joy for adolescents. And it's used in youth ministries. It's really good. If you're interested, it's at the Yale Institute for Youth Ministry, and it's a whole curriculum around joy. Okay,
Thanks,
we have
Melissa.
we have another question here from Pamela Mitchell that has to do with the variable of age and how age impacts our experience and our attitudes of positivism. She's noticed that people in their 70s seem to be more appreciative than we were in our 50s, is what Pamela says. What about that age factor?
Yeah, I've heard it described as the third act. Not that I have any experience with aging, but there, yeah, I think this isn't exactly my area of expertise, but I think that I think kind of one of the main people who does work on this that I'm really interested in is called his name is Gene Cohen, and I'll chat him out as well. Um, I'm trying to see if I can spot his book really quickly. Oh yeah, I have it real quick. Can you see this? The Mature Mind, the Positive Power of the Aging Brain. So I can chat that out too. And he says that actually the brain goes through changes as people age and becomes more flexible, more grateful, more tuned into social emotion. And so he reframes aging in a lot of ways that are pretty powerful for me and pretty compelling. So he does a lot with kind of creativity in later life, and he helps people get practice as artists in later life as well. And so I think there's a lot of potential for kind of life review early on, and like people kind of getting a chance to explore their legacy as well. Um, and some people have struggles with social supports and become isolated in their older years, or they have long journeys of caregiving, which can also really impact their experience of well-being. But I also think that there's a distinctive spiritual journey in the final third of life. We used to think, well, the life cycle theorists like Eric Erickson and others really stopped with the 60s. And now people are living into 60, 70, 80, and 90. And so we have a full third of people's life that hasn't really been well theorized. And we're not sure what goes on, but some people kind of split it out into the decades and say, the 70s have a distinctive set of psychological tasks, the 80s, the 90s. But I would guess it has something to do with kind of gracefully responding to the changes in our bodies while trying to stay connected with one another and be of service to the world as well.
Wow, that's great. I've ordered that book on Amazon while you're talking. I need it. Hello, Therese, has asked, how would you take this PERMA framework and infuse it or connect it more with the spiritual life, and particularly our Christian theology?
Yeah, those are great. That's a great question, Therese. It's nice to see you again. I really enjoyed having you as a student, Therese. And so that's a real joy to see former students on here and colleagues as well. I think, well, there's a lot of different ways of kind of thinking about. In my class, we do some work with this and try to kind of distinguish this perspective from kind of Pollyanna optimism a little bit. And one of the things that we think about too is kind of that notion of, from the Gospel of John, that Jesus has come to give us life and more abundantly, kind of trying to understand what that abundance of life looks like. There's also a sense in John's Gospel that you dwell in the Spirit, which becomes both like an advocate for you and also a source of support. And that partaking in the Spirit of God is like one of the ways that the soul is refreshed and restored. And I'm also thinking there's these lists in the New Testament, like lists of virtues or fruits of the Spirit. Interestingly, the fruit of the Spirit list in Galatians is all about church conflict. So it's kind of all about it's a list of the ways that we should be with one another in a setting that the church was disagreeing fundamentally about who they are with one another. And so I'm thinking, when we think about the spiritual gifts or the gifts of the Spirit in Galatians, I wonder if we could kind of connect it in some ways to our experience of positive emotions, to some of the aspects of PERMA. What I love about the New Testament notion of gifts is that they're really meant for the whole community. And so in a way, those theological ideas, add something significant to kind of the positive psychology spin on things, which tends to be a little individualistic. That's a weakness that it has, but
Yeah, wow, that's helpful. And, you know, as long as we're talking about the church, Kelly's asked the question about clergy burnout. That is something we hear a lot about. Some people on this call may be wrestling with that. And what's the pivot from burnout to flourishing? You know, are there practices that you would recommend? And as she points out, people say, I don't have any time for self-care. And so but you're talking about, you're not using the language of self-care. So is there a distinction there? And then from your perspective, what is that move from burnout to flourishing? Where do you start?
yeah. Thanks for that, Kelly. The a lot of this kind of depends on how far down the road you feel like you are in some ways. The the idea of like vicarious trauma that comes from the literature says that when you've experienced a lot of people's trauma, you kind of experience a diminishment of your own sense of spirituality, and things that were meaningful to you in the past spiritually are not as meaningful any longer. And I think like you're really right. Like there's a way in which clergy are really struggling. They're being challenged in fundamental ways, like in their very identity as ministers, in ways that they haven't been before. And that challenge is like really coming more frequently and more often, I think, than ever before in this very kind of polarized time. And then one of the challenges too is that sometimes clergy who are struggling seek people who are at a similar level of struggling. So instead of necessarily reaching out to the people who are flourishing the most, they might kind of make common cause with folks who are experiencing some of the same patterns that they're going through. And that can be nice in a way because it's like a nice mirror, but it also doesn't necessarily like give you some of the kind of resources or refreshment that might be helpful. I don't know. Some of this, I think, has to do with kind of how we evaluate the stresses that we're going through in ministry. And I've been reading some things about clergy self-care, and it seems like clergy take their jobs very seriously and very personally. And so they tend to experience real highs at work, but also real lows. And they also tend to perceive as failures things that other people might not perceive as failures. So they could be the kind of their own worst critic in a way. Then you also add into that all the ways that they have to kind of be subject to people's critique and scrutiny. I don't know. I would kind of covet like a chance to maybe set some emotional boundaries and like have a break from all the voices that are around you in clergy work, and have a chance to really restore like the amount of positive emotions that come into your life from day to day, and then work on kind of your own ability to recreate that positive reminiscence for yourself. And this might be something that takes a little extra support by others, depending on how discouraged it seems like you feel. And it also might need, some coaching or some help from someone who can kind of hear your story and the distinctive struggles that you're walking through. Sometimes that does better if it's not a supervisor, but it's someone who's like at a peer level, who can understand and identify with the distinctive struggles that people are going through. And I think those activities we talked about, the three things that went well, and gratitude and kindness, can be helpful parts. But I would say it also depends on how far along on the stress road you are. And you might need some more basic, like kind of like stress supports too, and boundaries and breaks. I don't I don't know if breaks can come your way too, but I know some of this can sound a little bit idealistic as well. I don't know, Kelly. I hope that was helpful. I really appreciate where your question comes from.
Okay. One we haven't gotten to is this AJ has asked the question about your signature strengths. And some of us have taken strengths assessments and our signature strengths change over time. Is that to be expected?
Yeah, I think that really is possible. And it kind of depends like on particular seasons in your life and what kind of work you're doing and what like your work brings out of you. I think certain strengths can be also like really match up with certain seasons in the life cycle. You can have certain strengths that are related to parenting or taking care of other people's children, or grandparenting, or strengths related to uh, middle-aged or older adulthood or young adulthood. I think they really do change over time. I wouldn't be surprised if there's also a core of maybe two or three that remain important to you, and those might be kind of people who know you really well might recognize those things as, oh yeah, you're really driven by that. Like, of course you come alive when that happens. So yeah, I think the signature strengths can change based on our environment and our season in life, and also I think there's some that are probably going to be a part of you long term too.
Great. I think that's very hopeful. All right. Amy has a question. A member of a church staff, assistant to the pastors. So it's a church staff person. What practices do you recommend for assisting pastors and staff in this way of flourishing? How do you
Yeah,
help somebody else do it?
that's really good question, Amy. Again, we've talked a little bit about this kind of like impossible job that's ministry, right? I mean, has anybody looked at a minister's like job description recently and looked at all the things that you're supposed to be good at? I think one thing is to really understand kind of how much criticism pastors are in for these days, and really try to do everything you can to be a countervailing voice. Doesn't mean that you go cheerleader optimistic or anything like that, but I would say uh, really refrain from critiquing your pastor and encourage them, and like also have respect for all the different kinds of work that they might be doing at a given time. So there's a like the pastor's work might alternate with the really joyful and the really sorrowful, and uh, work in one week that they might be completely at a loss around. And those are kind of the really hard things that come up in ministry sometimes, the really difficult traumas and what have you. I just think we don't always know that the ministers that we're working with have dealt with those things as well as all the other planning and more public roles that we see them do from week to week. So I think just a kind of gratitude and grace and encouragement for them, and then also just fostering encouragement in the congregational system as well, so that people are encouraged to like welcome and support their pastor. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think about your 3-to-1 ratio, the Losada ratio, to try to have an awareness of that in the congregation. We have a little bit of time. Any other question? You can raise your hand if you don't want to write it in the chat.
I could say something about Kelly's question about the three things: exercise versus gratitude
Oh,
journal.
I'm sorry.
No,
I missed that one. Yes, thank you,
nope.
Phil.
Sure, yeah. The three things that went well is like one level down from a gratitude journal. Of course, if you're perceptive, you could realize it's just a gratitude journal, but you don't have to say that you're grateful for something to say that it went well. So it could be something minor in your life, and then you're listing the reasons why that went well, and that can include some of your personal relationships. It can make you more grateful eventually, but it can also just be a source of meaning, like, and kind of discernment. Oh, I really like this part of my day. Like, I thought I had a really frustrating week for this given reason, but like every single day I had 3 things that went well, and like they were some of them were like out of my control, but grace, and like just looking at those things and not having to say that you're grateful for them is kind of nice at the same time. So you just write three things that went well kind of neutrally, and then why they matter to you. And it's interesting to see what people emphasize. Some people are very relational. Some people it's like just the facts, what the tasks that they go through or what have you. Different people value different things. But
Yeah, I was wondering about, even using that as an exercise at the opening of a session meeting or a committee meeting or something, and just have people say that thing and how that might set a tone for people to enter into the space together that
I
they're
think
going to
it
be.
is fun. I mean, I just did it recently at a Sunday school class. I did a similar presentation as this with a Sunday school class, and I was having people come up to me out of the blue, sharing the 3 things that went well, and they were telling me about people in their lives, and I was just like, cool. Yeah, you don't even necessarily have to share the details, but you could just share what the exercise was like with one another if you wanted to, and it could kind of
Yeah,
build community. Mhm.
I know. I'm just busted to hear what the rest of y'all said as one of your 3 things, but we don't have time, unfortunately. And thank you, Phil. We're at the end of our time, folks, and I put in the chat a link to an evaluation form. If you would take a moment to give us some feedback, we would appreciate it so we can be accountable for how we use our resources, and so we can improve and do better. You may know Phil's also leading a webinar series that is called Conversations in Wellbeing, and you are invited to participate in that too. You can find all the information on our website under the tab Lifelong Learning. Our next episode of Cultivating Ideas will be on October 26th. We're not meeting before then because of fall break at the seminary. And this will be with Dr. Asante Todd, and he will talk about relation, recognition, and religious biodiversity on the ethics of ecological respect. I don't even know what that means. I'm so curious to come and hear what he has to say. He has suggested that you might want to watch the movie Avatar 1 as a touch point for this. So if you are looking for a reason to watch a movie, I want to tell you it's your homework. And I'm sure Asante always, his mind is just incredibly interesting, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say. I hope we'll see you on October 26th.
That
Thank you,
sounds really
everybody.
good, Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.